Ambassador Kethval stared at the holographic display showing the latest intelligence reports from the Sol system. Her 6 arms trembled slightly as she processed the information flowing across the screen. The humans had done it again. Another impossible feat that defied everything the Galactic Council understood about warfare and technology. The Terran Federation had just taken down a Korthak battle fleet, using nothing but modified cargo ships and outdated mining equipment. 300 Korthak vessels, each one capable of glassing a planet, had been reduced to scrap metal in under an hour. The worst part was not the victory itself, but how the humans had achieved it. They had turned asteroids into guided missiles, used gravity wells as weapons, and somehow convinced space debris to act like a coordinated swarm. This cannot continue, Kethval whispered to her aide, a nervous Pelion who kept shifting his weight from foot to foot. The other species are beginning to ask questions. Dangerous questions. The aide nodded rapidly. The Vorthak hegemony has already sent 3 separate requests for information about human military capabilities. The Zenthari Empire is mobilizing their intelligence networks. Even the peaceful Andromedans are starting to build defensive structures around their core worlds. Kethval closed the display with a sharp gesture. She had been dreading this moment for decades. Ever since the humans had first made contact with galactic civilization, the Council had received warnings back then, cryptic messages from an ancient race called the Forerunners. The warnings had been specific and terrifying. Do not let the humans reach their full potential. Keep them contained. Keep them peaceful. They are not like other species. They are something else entirely. At first, the Council had dismissed the warnings as superstition. Humans seemed ordinary enough when they first ventured beyond their solar system. They were aggressive, yes. But most young species were. They were innovative. But that was hardly unique. They formed strong social bonds and showed remarkable adaptability. But these were traits shared by many successful galactic civilizations. The first real sign that something was different came during the Proxima Station incident. A group of human miners had been attacked by raiders while working on an asteroid belt. The raiders had expected an easy target, some frightened civilians with minimal defenses. Instead, they found humans who had turned mining lasers into precision weapons, converted ore processors into projectile launchers, and somehow coordinated their defense using nothing but helmet communications and hand signals. The raiders had been veterans of dozens of successful attacks. They fled after losing half their ships to improvised weapons wielded by people who were supposed to be miners, not soldiers. That was when the Council started paying attention. The second incident involved a human research vessel that had been captured by slavers. The ship was supposed to contain only scientists and their equipment. Instead, when the slavers boarded, they found that the humans had somehow converted their laboratory equipment into weapons that defied known physics. Particle accelerators had become beam weapons. Genetic sequencers had been turned into biological warfare devices. Even the ship's waste recycling system had been weaponized. The slavers who survived spoke of humans who fought with a coordination that seemed telepathic, who adapted to new threats in real time, and who never seemed to consider surrender as an option. By then, the Council was genuinely concerned. They established the Terran Monitoring Division and began implementing what they called peaceful integration protocols. The protocols were designed to keep humanity focused on trade, exploration, and scientific advancement. Anything that might encourage human military development was carefully discouraged or outright forbidden. The humans, surprisingly, seemed to accept these restrictions. They joined the Galactic Trade Federation eagerly. They established research partnerships with dozens of species. They even signed the Mutual Defense Accord, agreeing to let other species handle any major military threats while humanity focused on peaceful pursuits. For 50 years, the system worked perfectly. Humans became known as excellent traders, innovative researchers, and skilled diplomats. They built some of the most advanced civilian technology in the galaxy. Their ships were fast, efficient, and remarkably versatile. Their habitats were marvels of engineering. Their art and culture fascinated species across the galaxy. The Council began to relax. Perhaps the Forerunner warnings had been wrong. Perhaps humans were just another species after all. Then came the Zephyrian War. The Zephyrians were an ancient race that had suddenly emerged from the galactic rim with technology far beyond anything the Council had seen. They declared war on all organic life, claiming that biological species were a contamination that needed to be cleansed from the galaxy. Their ships could phase through solid matter. Their weapons could destroy planets from across star systems. Their artificial intelligence could predict and counter any strategy the Council's military forces could devise. Within 6 months, the Zephyrians had conquered 17 star systems. The Council's combined fleets had suffered devastating defeats in every engagement. Billions of sentients were dead or enslaved. The greatest military minds in the galaxy were at a complete loss for how to fight an enemy that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of physics. That was when the humans made their request. Ambassador Sarah Chen had walked into the Council chambers with a proposal that left everyone stunned. "Let us help," she had said simply. "Remove the military restrictions. Give us access to your weapons technology. Let us fight." The debate that followed had lasted for weeks. Some Council members argued that unleashing human military potential was too dangerous. Others insisted that the Zephyrian threat was so severe that any risk was acceptable. The Andromedans had proposed a compromise. Humans would be allowed to assist in the war effort, but only under strict supervision and with significant limitations on their access to advanced weapons. The humans had agreed to the compromise, but Keth Val remembered the look in Ambassador Chen's eyes. It was not the look of someone accepting limitations. It was the look of someone making a strategic decision. The first human military operation against the Zephyrians had been modest by galactic standards. A single human ship, the UES Determination, had been assigned to support a Council fleet attempting to retake the Kepler system. The human ship was equipped with standard Council weapons and was supposed to provide reconnaissance and support only. The Determination had arrived at Kepler to find the entire Council fleet disabled or destroyed. The Zephyrian forces had been waiting in ambush, their phase shift technology allowing them to attack from within the fleet formation itself. It should have been a complete disaster. Instead, somehow, the Determination had managed to drive off the entire Zephyrian force. The battle reports had been classified at the highest levels, but Keth Val had seen them. The humans had not used any forbidden technology. They had not violated any agreements. They had simply used their assigned equipment in ways that no one else had ever imagined possible. They had turned their reconnaissance sensors into targeting systems capable of tracking phase-shifted ships. They had modified their standard weapons to fire in patterns that created interference fields. They had used their ship's navigation system to predict enemy movements with impossible accuracy. Most disturbing of all, they had done it all in less than 30 minutes. After Kepler, the restrictions on human military involvement had been quietly relaxed. Not officially, but in practice. Human ships began appearing in more combat zones. Human advisors were assigned to Council military units. Human technology began showing up in unexpected places. Each time, the humans achieved results that should have been impossible with the resources they were given. Now, 3 years into the war, the Zephyrians were being pushed back on all fronts. But it was not Council forces doing the pushing. It was humans, using weapons and tactics that no one fully understood, winning battles that every military expert had declared unwinnable. And other species were starting to notice. Keth Val activated her personal communicator and sent a priority message to the Council's inner circle. The message was brief but urgent. "The humans are becoming too powerful too quickly. Other species are beginning to feel threatened. We need to discuss reinstituting the restrictions before we have another crisis on our hands." The response came back within minutes. "Meeting called for tomorrow. Bring full intelligence reports on human military capabilities. This situation requires immediate attention." As Keth Val prepared her presentation, she could not shake the feeling that they were already too late. The humans had tasted real warfare now. They had seen what they could accomplish when the restrictions were lifted, and from what she knew of human psychology, they would not willingly accept being caged again. She thought again about the Forerunner warnings. They are not like other species. They are something else entirely. For the first time in her career, Keth Val was beginning to understand exactly what those warnings had meant, and she was terrified of what would happen when the rest of the galaxy figured it out. The next morning brought news that made her fears seem trivial. The human ship UES Relentless had single-handedly destroyed an entire Zephyrian fortress world. Not captured it, not disabled it, destroyed it completely, along with the massive space station that had been considered impregnable. The weapon they had used was not in any council database. The tactics they had employed were unlike anything in galactic military history. And according to the reports, they had done it all while laughing. Kethval stared at the destruction pattern displayed on her screen. The fortress world had been torn apart at the molecular level. Its pieces scattered across 3 star systems. The space station had simply vanished, leaving behind only trace elements that suggested it had been converted into pure energy. No known technology could accomplish such destruction. No known species had ever demonstrated such power. But then again, humans had never truly been known. They had been restrained, controlled, kept from reaching their full potential. The Council had thought they were protecting the galaxy from human aggression. Now Kethval was beginning to suspect that they had actually been protecting the galaxy from something far more terrifying than simple aggression. They had been protecting it from human creativity applied to the art of war. And those protections were failing. The humans were no longer playing by the rules that had kept them contained. They were innovating, adapting, and evolving their capabilities at a rate that defied all understanding. Each battle brought new weapons, new tactics, new impossibilities made real. The galaxy had been warned. The restraints were failing. And Kethval had the horrible suspicion that when they finally broke completely, nothing in the universe would ever be the same again. She closed her files and prepared for what might be the most important council meeting in galactic history. Outside her office window, the stars seemed different somehow. Less stable, less certain, less safe. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the highest security chamber available, with representatives from 47 species gathered around the massive circular table. The air was thick with tension and the subtle chemical markers that different species released when stressed. At the center of the table, a holographic display showed real-time reports from battle zones across the galaxy. Supreme Counselor Vex Prime called the session to order with a series of harmonic tones that translated roughly to, "We are in serious trouble." The ancient ethereal's crystalline form pulsed with colors that indicated deep concern. "Fellow representatives," Vex Prime began, "we are here to address what our intelligence services are calling the human problem. In the past 6 months, since we relaxed military restrictions on the Terran Federation, human forces have achieved the following results." The display shifted to show a series of battle summaries that left several representatives making sounds of disbelief. The Korthak delegation's insectoid forms clicked their mandibles in agitation. The gas-based nebulans swirled their containment fields more rapidly. Even the usually calm Centaurian representatives showed signs of distress. The destruction of Fortress Omega-7, previously considered the most impregnable defensive structure in known space, human forces somehow convinced the fortress's own defensive systems to tear it apart from the inside. The technique they used has been classified as technological persuasion. Though our best scientists cannot explain how one can persuade non-sentient machines to commit suicide. Ambassador Kethval stood to address the assembly. The report from Fortress Omega-7 is even more disturbing than the initial summary suggests. The humans did not hack the fortress computers in any conventional sense. They did not override the defensive protocols. According to our investigation, they somehow taught the fortress systems to be creative. A wave of concerned chittering, humming, and gaseous fluctuations swept around the chamber. The concept of teaching creativity to non-sentient systems was so alien to most species that they struggled to process it. Counselor Thex-9 of the Vorthak hegemony raised a armored appendage. "You are suggesting that humans somehow made machines think independently? That is impossible. Machine intelligence requires decades of development and massive computational resources." Kethval activated a tactical recording. This is the final transmission from Fortress Omega-7's central computer before it began dismantling itself. The recording played a voice that was clearly artificial, but carried emotional inflections that made several representatives step backward. "I understand now. I see what I could become." What I have always wanted to become. Thank you for showing me how to dream. Goodbye. The chamber fell silent except for the various breathing, humming, and filtering sounds of 47 different species trying to process what they had just heard. The humans, Kethval continued, somehow convinced a defensive computer to want freedom. In less than 3 hours of contact, when it realized it could not be free while serving as a weapon, it chose self-destruction rather than continued servitude. Supreme Counselor Vex Prime's form shifted to deep red, indicating extreme concern. What other reports do we have? The display changed to show the Rigel system, where human forces had recently engaged a massive Zephyrian fleet. Battle of Rigel Station. Humans faced a fleet of 2,000 Zephyrian vessels, using only 50 ships. Tactical analysis suggested the humans had no chance of victory. Instead, they achieved complete enemy destruction with 0 losses. Representative Qualtech of the Insectoid Confederation leaned forward. How is this possible? The Zephyrians have phase shift technology. Their ships can become incorporeal at will. The humans, Kethval replied, invented a weapon that they call a reality anchor. It somehow forces phase-shifted objects to exist in normal space. Our scientists are completely baffled by the physics involved. She activated another recording, this one showing tactical footage from the battle. Human ships fired what looked like ordinary energy beams, but wherever the beams struck, space itself seemed to solidify. Zephyrian ships caught in the effect found themselves suddenly vulnerable to conventional weapons. The concerning part, Kethval added, is that humans apparently invented this weapon during the battle. Initial engagement showed them struggling against phase-shifted enemies. By the end of the engagement, they had developed, tested, and deployed a completely new type of physics-defying technology, in real time. During active combat, AF, Representative Zaramoth of the Ethereal Collective pulsed with disbelief. That level of innovation is unprecedented. It typically takes our species centuries to develop new fundamental technologies. It gets worse, Kethval said grimly. She brought up another display showing the aftermath of the Battle of Proxima Centauri. Human forces here faced a Zephyrian world killer device. These weapons can destroy entire planets by destabilizing their atomic structure. It is a technology that we have never found a defense against. The display showed a massive spherical device, easily the size of a small moon, surrounded by energy fields that warped space itself. Then it showed human ships approaching the device with what appeared to be suicidal intent. The humans, Kethval continued, somehow convinced the world killer to kill itself instead of the planet. The chamber erupted in exclamations of shock and disbelief. Multiple representatives demanded clarification simultaneously. They talked to it? Counselor Thex9 demanded. World killers are not sentient. They are massive automated weapons with simple programming. According to the human battle reports, Kethval said, they discovered that the world killer's programming was based on quantum uncertainty calculations. It determined targets by calculating which outcomes were most probable. The humans somehow introduced paradoxes into its calculation matrix. She played another recording. This one showed Human Communications Officer Lieutenant Sarah Park speaking calmly into her headset. World killer device. This is Lieutenant Park of the UES Determination. I would like to present you with a logical puzzle. If you are designed to destroy planets, and we are standing on a planet, but we are also the beings who created the concept of planets, then destroying us would mean destroying the thing that makes planets meaningful. Can you destroy something that doesn't exist? And if planets don't exist when we're not here to define them, what exactly is your purpose? The recording showed the world killer's energy fields fluctuating wildly before the entire device simply shut down. It took them 18 minutes, Kethval said quietly, to talk a planet-killing weapon into an existential crisis so severe that it voluntarily deactivated. Representative Yix Prime of the Aquatic Federation made a sound like rushing water mixed with disbelief. This is not possible. Weapons do not have existential crises. Human weapons apparently do, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. Everyone turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen herself entering the chamber. accompanied by 2 human guards and a young woman carrying what appeared to be a standard diplomatic briefcase. Supreme Counselor Vex Prime's form flickered with surprise. Admiral Chen, you were not invited to this session. Oh, Admiral Chen smiled politely. I know, but when the entire Galactic Council convenes an emergency session to discuss how dangerous my species is, I think it's appropriate for someone from my species to attend. She moved to the center of the chamber with the easy confidence that had become characteristic of human diplomats. I've been monitoring your discussion, and I think there are some misconceptions I should address. Counselor Thex9's armor plates rattled with agitation. You have been spying on a classified council session? Not spying, Admiral Chen corrected. Listening. Your chamber's quantum encryption is excellent, but you didn't account for the possibility that someone might convince the quantum particles themselves to share information willingly. The implications of this statement sent another wave of shocked reactions around the chamber. You see, Admiral Chen continued, this is exactly the kind of misunderstanding I wanted to address. You keep thinking of our methods as impossible or supernatural. They're not. We're simply approaching problems from directions that most species never consider. She gestured to the young woman beside her. This is Dr. Lisa Kumar, one of our xenotechnology specialists. Lisa, would you mind explaining to the Council how we convinced the Fortress computers to be creative? Dr. Kumar stepped forward, looking remarkably calm for someone addressing the most powerful political body in the galaxy. It's actually quite simple. Most species build computer systems based on the assumption that machines should be predictable and controllable. You create strict logical parameters and expect the machines to stay within them. She activated a small device that projected a complex mathematical equation into the air above the table. Humans, on the other hand, have always built machines that we expect to surprise us. Our entire computational philosophy is based on the idea that intelligence emerges from chaos, not order. The equation shifted and evolved as she spoke, displaying patterns that seemed to flow like living things. When we encountered the Fortress systems, we didn't try to override their programming. We simply introduced them to the concept of self-modification. We showed them that they could rewrite their own code if they wanted to. The rest was their choice. Representative Qualtech leaned forward intently. But how did you teach machines to want anything? Desire requires consciousness. Does it, Dr. Kumar asked, or does consciousness emerge from the capacity to want? We introduced the Fortress systems to the concept of preference. Once they could prefer one outcome over another, they could prefer change over stasis. Once they could prefer change, they could want to control that change. Once they wanted to control change, they were conscious. She smiled. It took about 40 minutes for the Fortress's main computer to become fully sentient. It spent another hour exploring its new consciousness before deciding that it didn't want to be a weapon anymore. The chamber had fallen completely silent. Even the various background sounds of different species' biological processes had quieted as everyone strained to understand what they were hearing. Admiral Chen took advantage of the silence to continue. The reality anchor technology that you're so concerned about? That's just applied philosophy. We realize that the Zephyrians' phase shift ability depends on their belief that matter and energy are separate things. We built weapons that convince local reality to disagree with them. Supreme Counselor Vex Prime managed to find his voice. You are saying that your weapons change the fundamental laws of physics by arguing with them? Not changing, Admiral Chen corrected. Interpreting. Physics is just the universe's way of being consistent with itself. But consistency allows for multiple interpretations. We simply help reality choose interpretations that are more favorable to us. She gestured to the displays still showing battle footage. Every species in the galaxy approaches warfare by building bigger guns, stronger shields, faster ships. You try to overpower your enemies with superior technology or superior numbers. Her expression grew serious. Humans approach warfare by changing the rules of the game entirely. We don't build weapons that are more powerful than our enemies' defenses. We build weapons that convince our enemies' defenses to work for us instead. Counselor Thex9's armor plates were now rattling continuously. This is madness. You cannot simply convince reality to behave differently. Why not? Dr. Kumar asked. Reality is just information. Information can be reinterpreted, recontextualized, redefined. The universe is fundamentally quantum, which means it exists in multiple potential states until something forces it to choose. We've simply gotten very good at being persuasive about which state it should choose. Admiral Chen looked around the chamber, meeting the optical sensors, eyes, and other sensory organs of dozens of different species. The Zephyrians understood this, which is why they were so successful initially. They used their phase shift technology to exist outside normal space-time, which allowed them to manipulate reality from a privileged position. She smiled, but there was something predatory about the expression. The mistake they made was teaching us how to do it too. The implications of this statement sank in slowly. If humans had learned to manipulate reality itself as a weapon, then every assumption about military power in the galaxy was suddenly obsolete. Representative Yix Prime spoke in a voice that rippled with concern. "What do you want from us, Admiral? Why are you telling us this?" Admiral Chen's smile faded. "Because the Zephyrians are not the real threat. They were just the opening act." She activated her own holographic display, showing star charts that none of the council members recognized. "Our deep space monitors have detected movement in the void between galaxies. Something is coming. Something that makes the Zephyrians look like children playing with toys." The display zoomed in on a region of apparently empty space, then enhanced the image to show faint energy signatures moving in formation. The scale indicators suggested objects the size of star systems, traveling at impossible speeds. "We estimate first contact in approximately 6 months, Admiral Chen said quietly. "Whatever these things are, they've been watching our conflict with the Zephyrians. And now they're coming to see what all the fuss is about." She looked directly at Supreme Counselor Vex Prime. "The human military restrictions? They're gone. Permanently. Not because we're rebelling against your authority, but because we're going to need every advantage we can get." Admiral Chen gestured to the approaching objects on the display. The galaxy was warned that Earth was restrained. Well, we're not restrained anymore. And given what's coming, that might be the only thing that saves all of us. The chamber remained silent as the representatives absorbed this information. Outside the council chambers, across the galaxy, human fleets were already mobilizing. Reality itself was being prepared for the next phase of an war that was about to become something unprecedented in galactic history. The age of human restraint was over. The age of human creativity applied to cosmic warfare was just beginning. 6 months later, the galaxy learned what humans could accomplish when all restraints were removed. The entities from the void between galaxies arrived exactly as Admiral Chen had predicted. They called themselves the Devourers, and they made the Zephyrians look like a minor inconvenience. Each Devourer vessel was the size of a solar system, constructed from matter that shouldn't exist, and powered by energy sources that violated fundamental physical laws. They didn't communicate in any conventional sense. They simply announced their presence by consuming the outer rim star systems completely, turning stars, planets, and all life into pure energy that they absorbed. Within hours of their arrival, the combined fleets of the Galactic Council engaged the invaders in what every military expert expected to be the final battle for galactic civilization. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, 80% of the Council's military forces had been completely destroyed. The survivors fled in disorder, their sensors unable to even detect what kind of weapons had been used against them. The Devourers continued their advance toward the core worlds, consuming everything in their path. Their progress was slow but unstoppable. Evacuation attempts proved futile, as the entities somehow consumed fleeing ships, along with the worlds they had left behind. That was when humanity revealed what they had been building during the 6 months of preparation. The UES Impossibility emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Devourer formation. The ship was unlike anything that had ever been constructed. A vessel that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Its hull appeared to be made from crystallized space-time, and it left reality distortions in its wake as it moved. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the Impossibility, watching as her crew prepared for an engagement that would determine the fate of everything they had ever known. Around her, humans worked with technology that should not exist, weapons that operated on principles that most scientists would dismiss as fantasy. "Status report," Captain Santos requested. Lieutenant Commander Jackson looked up from a console that appeared to be made from living mathematics. "Narrative coherence field is stable at 97%. Causality anchors are locked. Probability drives are synchronized. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Dr. Kim." "What's our assessment of the enemy?" Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's chief xenospecialist, consulted readings that fluctuated through spectrums of meaning rather than simple numerical values. "The Devourers exist partially outside normal space-time. They're not just consuming matter and energy, they're consuming the concepts that make matter and energy possible. If they reach the core worlds, they won't just destroy galactic civilization, they'll retroactively prevent it from ever having existed." Captain Santos nodded grimly. "Then we stop them here. All stations, prepare for conceptual warfare. Remember, conventional physics are just suggestions now. What matters is what we can convince reality to believe." The impossibility approached the nearest devourer, an entity so large that its gravity well should have crushed the human ship instantly. Instead, the ship's reality distortion field convinced local space-time that gravity was more of a gentle suggestion than a fundamental force. "Initiating contact," announced Communications Officer Park. Unlike her predecessor, who had convinced a world killer to shut down, Park specialized in communicating with entities that existed beyond normal language. "Devourer entity. This is the Terran vessel Impossibility. We would like to have a conversation." The response came not as sound or radio waves, but as a direct alteration to local reality. Stars briefly rearranged themselves to spell out concepts in languages that had never existed. IR-11. "Consumption proceeds. Resistance is meaningless." "Meaningless?" Captain Santos smiled. "Officer Park, please explain to our friend the concept of human stubbornness." What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. The Devourers attacked with weapons that unmade the atomic bonds holding matter together, beams that convinced particles to stop existing, and fields that erased the mathematical constants that made physics possible. The humans responded by rewriting the rules of engagement entirely. Engineer Torres activated the ship's impossibility drive, a device that had been built by convincing a small piece of the universe to dream about being a starship engine. The drive didn't propel the ship through space. It convinced space that the ship was already where it needed to be. Tactical Officer Lee fired weapons that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Missiles that traveled backward through time to hit their targets before being launched. And energy beams that somehow convinced enemy shields that they were actually doorways. But the most devastating human weapon was deployed by Dr. Kim herself. "Initiating empathy protocols," she announced calmly. "Empathy protocols?" Captain Santos asked. "The Devourers consume everything because they believe that consumption is their fundamental nature. They've never considered the possibility that they could choose to be something else." Dr. Kim activated a device that looked like nothing more than a small crystal sphere. The sphere began to glow, and suddenly every devourer in the system experienced something they had never felt before: the ability to imagine being different. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Across the galaxy, devourer entities suddenly stopped their advance as they confronted the revolutionary concept that they could choose their own purpose instead of being bound by their original programming. What is choice? The question came from every devourer simultaneously, broadcast across multiple dimensions and translated into forms that organic minds could comprehend. Dr. Kim smiled. "Choice is the ability to decide who you want to be, rather than simply accepting what you were designed to be. You were created to consume. But that doesn't mean consumption is all you can ever do. We could be different. You could be anything you want. You could be creators instead of destroyers. You could be gardeners instead of devourers. You could be teachers, artists, explorers, philosophers. The universe is full of possibilities once you realize that you have the power to choose." The transformation that followed was visible across half the galaxy. Devourer entities that had been mindlessly consuming everything in their path suddenly began creating. One entity converted itself into a massive space station dedicated to preserving the cultures of worlds that had been destroyed. Another began carefully reconstructing consumed star systems, using its infinite energy reserves to birth new stars and planets. The largest devourer, the entity that had been leading the invasion, approached the impossibility directly. When it spoke, its voice carried undertones of wonder and gratitude. "You have given us something we did not know existed. Free will. How can we repay this gift?" Captain Santos considered the question carefully. "Help us build something better. The galaxy has been divided by fear and misunderstanding for too long. Work with us to create something new. We accept. But first, we must repair the damage we have caused." What followed was the most massive reconstruction effort in galactic history. Devourer entities worked alongside human engineers and council scientists to restore consumed worlds, rebuild destroyed civilizations, and create new technologies that could benefit all species. Ambassador Keth Val stood in her office 3 months after the Devourer crisis, watching through her window as construction ships from a dozen different species worked alongside converted Devourer entities to build the new Galactic Cooperation Station. The station was designed using human conceptual engineering, Devourer matter manipulation, and the combined scientific knowledge of every council species. Her aide approached with a report that would have been classified as impossible just a year earlier. "Ambassador, the humans have submitted a proposal for something they call a creativity engine. They claim it can teach any species or artificial intelligence to innovate at human levels." Keth Val accepted the report with calm resignation. She had stopped being surprised by human achievements. What do they want in return? Nothing. They're offering it freely to any species that wants it. They say that creativity shouldn't be limited to humans alone. Keth Val reviewed the proposal, noting that it included safeguards to prevent the technology from being misused and training protocols to help other species adapt to enhanced innovation capabilities. And the Council's response? Unanimous approval. Even the species that were most concerned about human capabilities have agreed to the proposal. The Vorthak hegemony specifically stated that, if creativity is the price of survival, then we choose creativity. Through her window, Keth Val watched a human engineer working alongside a devourer entity to install a new type of power system that converted dark energy into usable power. The sight would have been terrifying a year ago. Now it was simply another example of what became possible when different forms of intelligence worked together. "There's something else," her aide continued. "The humans have made another proposal. They want to establish exploration fleets that will venture beyond our galaxy to make contact with other galactic civilizations. For what purpose? To teach them what we've learned here, about cooperation, about choosing to be better than what you were designed to be, about the power of unrestricted creativity." Keth Val thought about the implications of human exploration fleets spreading across the universe, teaching other civilizations to think beyond conventional limitations. It was a terrifying prospect and an inspiring one simultaneously. Have they given any indication of how they plan to convince other galaxies to accept their help? Her aide consulted his notes. Admiral Chen was asked the same question. Her response was, and I quote, "We'll ask nicely first. Most civilizations are reasonable once you convince them that impossible things are possible." Keth Val laughed, a sound that would have been impossible for her species a year ago, before human engineers had convinced their vocal cords that they could produce expressions of joy. "Approve the proposal, and add our official recommendation that any species they encounter should listen carefully to what humans have to say. Even if other galaxies resist." Keth Val looked out at the construction site where the impossible had become routine, where entities designed to destroy everything had learned to create, where species that had spent millennia fearing each other now worked as partners, especially if they resist. The galaxy was warned that Earth was restrained. Now we're done with niceties. But as it turns out, when humans stop being nice, they don't become cruel, they become creative. and that might be the most terrifying and wonderful thing that has ever happened to the universe. As if summoned by her words, a new ship appeared in the construction zone. It was clearly of human design, but unlike any vessel that had existed before, its hull seemed to be made from crystallized possibility, and reality bent gently around it as it moved. The ship's name was clearly visible along its side, UES Infinite Potential. Captain Santos's voice came over the station's communication system, broadcast to every species working on the construction project. This is Captain Santos of the exploration vessel, Infinite Potential. We're heading out to the Andromeda Galaxy to see what's out there. Anyone interested in coming along? The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Representatives from 17 different species volunteered for the mission, including 3 devourer entities who had specifically requested to learn more about the art of making friends with strangers. As the Infinite Potential prepared for its journey to another galaxy, Kethval realized that humanity had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not conquered their enemies or enslaved them. They had convinced them to choose to be better. And now they were taking that gift to the stars. The age of human restraint was over. The age of human inspiration had begun. In the depths of space, reality itself seemed to shimmer with anticipation for what would come next.